to really our biggest celebration of the year. We reflect back and give credit to all the students who've really done fantastic work, not only the ones who are getting awards here tonight, but everybody. It's a celebration at the end of the semester as well as these awards. Some people might be trickling in. There's a few people that we're expecting to come. But I do not plan to speak at great length because we have a fantastic meal that Earl cooked by his cooking all day and has prepared up for reception afterwards and the hours late. So I'm especially excited to be welcoming today Dr. Evren Balta as our distinguished alumna because, well, it's always fun to have people back who are so distinguished, but I was on the dissertation defense committee, and it was a fascinating dissertation. It's about all I can remember because it happened 10 years ago. But let me just say a few words about Evren. So her PhD was received in 2007, and it was titled "Military Success, State Capacity, Internal War Making in Russia and Turkey." Great comparative analysis. She has published prolifically since leaving us in journals and published articles in ethnic and racial studies, in sociology, in gender, place, and culture. She's the author of a book entitled Global Security Complex, and she's already completed another book manuscript called The American Passport in Turkey, Citizenship and Belonging in the Age of Global Empire. In addition, she's edited a number of books, Introduction to Global Politics, Military State, and Politics in Turkey. I don't know why anyone would be interested in that subject. Neighbors with Suspicion, Dynamics of Turkish-Russian Relations. And while doing all of this, she's an active blogger. She's received a number of grants from the Mellon Foundation, European Union Horizon Grant, Fulbright Scholar. In fact, she's here at NYU this year as a research fellow, as a visiting scholar at NYU. And last year, she was a research fellow in the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna. So it is a great pleasure to have Evren come up. And she's going to, so here's your fancy plaque. There you go. Evren is going to, we coerced her into giving us a talk about some of her recent research, and she's going to be talking to us today about the global rise of personalized rule.
I really feel greatly privileged to be here with you for this special occasion tonight. And I'm also really at loss of words how to convey how truly honored I feel in receiving this award. For every PhD student, the institution from which she receives her degree remains forever her life's most decisive institution. This is what the CUNY Graduate Center's Political Science program means to me. And this is why this award, which really overwhelms me, and I'm really excited about it. This award is really and will always remain one of the most meaningful awards of my life. So despite what the PhD students may often believe, being a graduate student in political science is not only about spending your most valuable, I would say, decade, your 20s, in the libraries, reading and writing. It is also about losing the privilege, being oblivious to the most pressing questions of our times and the right to ignorance. So this is a privilege that I proudly and willingly lost thanks to the education that I received here. So I have really many people to thank, and I really want to start with that before my political science speech.
Can you stay closer to the mic?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So I have many people to thank, but my first heartfelt thanks go to my PhD supervisor, Professor Susan Rupert. She has always been an excellent mentor to me and to many others. As many of you know here, her classes have been full of excellent readings, although very tough, and rigorous discussion. She taught us, I would say, not only the need to ask the right questions, which was a very important part of her classes, asking the right question, but also that asking the right question often involves forgetting what you already know. So I really learned a lot from her, and thank you for that. I also want to thank Professor Markowitz, who has been one of the most supportive people that I have ever met in academic circles. And I think many of us at CUNY Graduate Center learn to respect each other and other people's works from him. Of course, there are many others that I had the privilege to take classes from or exchange ideas with, and sometimes I should say in the forms of exams. And my sincere thanks therefore to Kenneth Erickson, Peter Lieberman, Tom Weiss, Francis Fox-Piven, Vince Boudrio, Jake Jacobs, Sherry O'Baver, and many of them are here, and I'm really glad to see them tonight. My special thanks also, I really want to mention this, goes to Professor Howard Lentner, who is not here with us anymore. But when I arrived here to the Graduate Center, he had the reputation of being one of the toughest or the scariest, I would say, professors at the GC. But at the same time, someone who you can really learn a lot. And you were supposed to learn from him tremendously. And I not only ended up admiring him, but also emulated him as I shaped my teaching style. And I also learned a lot from my peers here at the GC, and I had the most outstanding cohort here one can ever wish for. We developed an amazing solidarity. Danielle is here, Karen, Antoinette, Sumi, and everyone. We still read each other's manuscripts after 10 years, pass on grant and project announcements, get involved in each other's works. And I mean, I really want to thank all of them for continuing to be part of my life, and it really means a lot to me. I mean, as you were told, I was supposed to do a half-an-hour speech in front of the people that I admire so much, that I really derive much of my intellectual inspiration. This is a tough task. But that's what I trained for, we all trained for, so I'll give my best shot. My dissertation, and you were also told about my dissertation, which I defended in 2007, was a comparative study of Russia and Turkey. And since then, both countries have developed increasingly similar regime types, in which the tools of bureaucracy and the power of the state are used to implement the will of the leader. I wish this development was only academically appealing topic to me, but it never was just that. Like so many others, it has shaped and continues to shape my life tremendously. As Arundhati Roy complained in a recent interview, most of the time, we academics turn this major crisis into academic issues or little subjects for our PhDs, but this is also the substance of our lives, part and parcel of what we we experience and what we breathe. So, and I believe we always have to keep this in mind. So for this talk, I decided to narrate my personal journey in Turkey after I defended my dissertation and try to make it a little bit reflective of our times. Times in which power holders are manipulating the reality and distort the morality of the society to suit their interests. In the announcement tonight, I was cited as a faculty member of the Yıldız Technical University of Istanbul, Turkey. I used to be. I had to resign my post in 2017 after the university administration decided that I could not use my Fulbright scholarship to come to the US and travel abroad to anywhere because I had signed a petition supporting the burial rights of my student, one of my students, who was designated a terrorist by the state, who died in Syria. So what happened to me really registers as peanuts compared to what others have gone through in Turkey in the last 2 years. In 2016, almost 2,000 academics signed a petition criticizing Turkish state's use of violence against its own citizens. I was not one of the signatories, but my husband, my friends, and my colleagues were. Nearly 5,000 academics were stripped of their position, mostly by emergency decrees, only because they signed this petition. Many others have left the country due to fear of reprisals. In the department that I was working at Yıldız Technical University, 18 of my colleagues who signed this petition lost their jobs, again with an emergency decree. In an attempt to prevent any kind of collective resistance, these emergency decrees tended to be announced around midnight, usually on Fridays. I remember gathering in front of our computers, staying up all night on Fridays, waiting for the next emergency decree that could change our lives and our friends' lives indefinitely. These emergency decrees are still operational in Turkey. If your name is on the list, it not only means losing your current job, but also total exclusion from the Turkey's academic labor market, and in fact, not the academic labor market, but the labor market as a whole. It also means losing your passport that is immediately revoked because you're on the emergency decree. This sudden loss of titles, jobs, livelihood, and freedom to travel was not the end of the story either. On 2017 December, like 6 months ago I guess, in the high criminal courts in Istanbul, trials began for those who signed the peace petition. Each signatory, like my student, has been charged with making propaganda in support of a terrorist organization. If found guilty, each faces a prison sentence of up to 7.5 years. So yes, let me say that here it was not just the academics for peace who lost their jobs. And in some ways, academics were the privileged ones, because at least their stories made the news and they received international attention and support. Using emergency powers and vaguely worded anti-terrorism laws, the authorities have also suspended or dismissed more than 100,000 people from public sector, if I'm not mistaken about the number, from public sector positions and arrested more than 60,000. Extensive use of pre-trial detention, torture of detainees have both been reported by human rights associations. Journalists, human rights activists, and civil society leaders have been detained and charged with attempting to overthrow the constitutional order. This year, Turkey is for the 3rd year in a row the world's champion for jailing journalists. At least 1,500 civil society organizations have been summarily closed and their property confiscated. Arrests based on messages shared via social media are becoming more and more common as our content removal requests and blocking of websites that carry critical information about Turkey, such as Wikipedia. This steep democratic decline did not just happen in the realm of civil rights, only affecting organizations of civil society. Last year, as many of you know probably, A constitutional referendum centralized power in the presidency, while elected mayors were being replaced with government appointees. Dozens of elected mayors and 12 MPs, almost all of whom are Kurds, of course, including the co-chairpersons of Turkey's third largest political party, HDP, have been held in jail for more than a year now without any sound legal basis. Let me not go on any further. We are all political scientists, so we all know the codebook of authoritarianism and the science of democratic regression that is now being employed in full force in Turkey. In fact, centralization of power in the executive, politicization of judiciary, attacks on independent media, the use of public office for private gains is happening in many parts of the world, from Russia to India and surprisingly even in the United States. So what still puzzles me as a political scientist, however, is the speed and the depth of this transformation in Turkey. This was a country 5-10 years ago with a vibrant civil society, dense international ties, becoming a member of possible member of European Union just 10 years ago, a long experience with democracy and multi-party politics, has a flourishing middle class, and also has an economy that depends on international trade with no natural resources to sustain authoritarianism. Indeed, Turkey was a shining star of the region in the first decades of 2000s. Arguably, its economic and social outlook seemed brighter and more optimistic than it has ever been in its whole history. So when I was about to finish my PhD, I was eager to go back to Turkey. And it was just not me. I have, as you said, I have recently finished this book manuscript on American citizens in Turkey who migrated to Turkey in the mid-2000s. In all the interviews I did, everyone mentioned how welcoming the political culture of Turkey was, how open the Turkish market was back then, and how democratic Turkish political system appeared to them. This was the perception that many of us shared. As a result, as I said, not just me, but many of my friends, Turkish friends, whom I met in the United States when I was doing my PhD, went back to Turkey, found well-paid jobs in established universities with ample opportunities for research in a polite, liberal academic environment. Yet nowadays, many of us are questioning the decision we made just 10 years ago. Many of us have left the country, many others, my friends, including myself, left the country using the exit option that has become so popular among the wealthiest and the best educated citizens of Turkey. But let me open a parenthesis here. The use of exit option can itself be a topic for another talk, because I think the prevalence of this option is one of the significant features of today's authoritarianism. So here is the puzzle after this long introduction. What happened in just less than 8 years that such a thriving country has taken a shortcut to authoritarianism and has become the world's, fastest deteriorating democracy? Many explanations focus on the personality and ambitions of leaders, political culture, and especially, particularly, the ambitions and the personality of the President Erdogan. I disagree. Of course, leadership matters, but as we know, it never is the whole story. Neither in Turkey, nor in Russia, or in India do these rulers rule alone. Bruno Duane de Mesquita opens his book, The Dictator's Handbook, with what he considers the #1 rule of political science: no one rules alone. Instead, there are always competing political coalitions and interests, and major structural transformations. And of course, I did not learn this from Bruno Duane de Mesquita, but maybe from the GC faculty here. Major structural transformations that shape each authoritarian outcome. I will now try to share you with what my explanation of what happened. And I think it's in some ways, this outline may capture what is happening elsewhere too. First, I think one of the most significant but underestimated features of our times is the global decline of the appeal of the West. There are many reasons for this, such as the 2008 economic crisis, the US intervention in the Middle East and its subsequent withdrawal, the crisis of Europe, its inability to interact with outsiders, including Turkey, and Europe's failure, or in general, the failure to create a stable and durable security order, and you can go on. All these problems became especially pressing and intense since the 2011 democratic uprisings and their repression, with increasing opportunities of anti-Westernism among political entrepreneurs of various sorts, and you can say with the governments, international actors, and non-state actors like ISIS. This perceived or real decline of the West has also unleashed an intense political competition for global and regional influence, which has simultaneously and substantively affected the domestic coalitions. This was the time when a significant portion of the Turkey's political elites began to question Turkey's dense ties with the West and pressing for a more Euro-Asianist alliance structure, which opens out new paths to Turkey, which then really affects the domestic political coalitions and how they rule. Second, although I'm not going to discuss its causes here, the liberal form of democracy not only lost its appeal in my country and everywhere, but it is also under serious attack almost from everywhere. Of course, citizens still want to be part of the decision-making process, and electoral democracy, as we know, still very much intact. And this is one of the reasons why authoritarianism of every sort, everywhere, do not give up on elections. But even advanced democracies no longer promote democratic values as they do. In fact, we cannot understand how terrorism is debated in Turkey, in Russia, or in India, now without considering how the US constructed a system of emergency powers after 9/11 and the redesigning of a national security state here. We cannot understand how terrorism allegations are used to curb the basic rights and freedoms in Turkey without a close look at the 2002 European Council Framework decision to combat terrorism or the 2005 European Council Counterterrorism Strategy. These were very influential in Turkey as well. So Freedom House figures show that, starting from the very beginning of the 2000s, the whole world, including the West, has experienced a disturbing decline in global freedom. 55% of countries are now considered not free or partly free. While I'm not a big fan of late Samuel Huntington's, I believe he was right when he argued that democracy comes in waves, that its progress is never linear and there are always backlashes. The backlash to the first wave, as we know, was fascism. The second was military dictatorships. And maybe we are now currently experiencing the third backlash, characterized by highly personalized regimes. These regimes are taking control of autocratic and even democratic political systems. Across regions, consolidated power is settling into the hands of a one man or small group of illiberal individuals. In Huntington's scheme, however, some wishful thinking is present as we are asked to believe that there will be another resurgence of democracy. However, I am not sure if this time democracy is merely hollowed out or the scary possibility of it having transformed into something dangerous seems to me quite real. Okay, so this is more general, but my third explanation for Turkey, for the rapid deterioration of democracy, concerns the war in Syria, since its effects are so significant on the neighboring countries and in the region as a whole. This war, like many other contemporary civil wars, as I first learned in your classes, Professor Weber, had displayed a transnational character where actors, resources, and events span national boundaries. Syrian war was another factor that unleashed the regional ambitions of Turkey's elites in the context of West's declining power. It has allowed Turkey to become the patron of a significant portion of the region's Sunni opposition, and let Turkey play a role beyond its actual resources and capacity through playing on the potency of the sectarian identities to galvanize supporters and to maintain support. Political entrepreneurs of all sorts, from international actors to non-state groups, have also played on these identities, consolidating the sectarian divide in the region. Turkey is also now hosting more than 3 million refugees, while militants, fighters, and aid from various sources flow through it. We do not know the extent of these developments in Turkish politics, because these questions are deemed taboo by the government. But we already know from the literature on previous civil wars the extent of corruption, these flows, the flows of aid and militants and everything, money, unimaginable amounts of money that can create on any government. More importantly, maybe, the war in Syria has also transformed the Kurdish question in Turkey to an unprecedented degree. A decade ago, Kurdish nationalist movements in Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and Syria were mainly restricted to each country separately. There was no clear transnational Kurdish movement, and each state was only dealing with its own Kurdish movements. The Syrian conflict has enabled a thoroughly transnational Kurdish nationalist movement to emerge, mainly led by Turkey's PKK, backed by major powers, and with no other regional power capable of helping the Turkish government to repress it. This has intensified the ontological security concerns of Turkey, with its nationalist elites feeling isolated internationally, regionally, in the face of growing Kurdish secessionism, or you could say transnationalism. This became especially noticeable after the siege of Syrian Kurdish town Kobane by ISIS. When the Turkish government made it known that it preferred the fall of the town to ISIS, there were widespread protests in Kurdish cities that left 42 people dead. Then the US openly declared it would support Kurds against ISIS, and there began the cooperation between Turkey's NATO ally and the Syrian branch of its nemesis PKK, the PYD. What was particularly alarming to the Turkish state was summarizing the banners that Kobane protesters in Turkey were carrying, declaring Kobane is Diyarbakir. And for those who do not know, Diyarbakir is considered as Turkish Kurds consider Diyarbakir as their capital in Kobane. So really signifying this really transnational aspect of the problem. So Syria's war has indirectly become Turkey's war. And from James Madison, like we say, that war is in fact the true nurse of executive aggrandizement. So let me go to my final point. I think what all these developments have unleashed an intense elite conflict in Turkey. One of the major domestic consequences of this conflict is the coup attempt of July 15, 2016. These conflicts between the elites range from questions over Turkey's external alliances, its links to the past, redistribution of resources, and you can go on. So Machiavelli noted that in a republic, the constitution of one-man rule is directly related to the conflict among elites. Similarly, according to Elias, intense tension among the elites is the key instrument of the emergence of a one-man rule. For Marx, intense conflict within the ruling bloc is usually followed by the rise of a powerful political figure, a Bonaparte. According to Sudir Hazarasingh, I can't pronounce his last name, Hazarasingh, a Bonaparte is a, and I quote, popular national leader confirmed by popular election above party politics with a belief in religion as an adjunct to the state, a belief that the central authority can transform society, and finally with a fundamental belief in national unity. Okay, as a comparative scholar of Russia and Turkey, let me add a note. What I explained here is pretty much occurring in Russia as well. The perceived decline of the West, the lost appeal of liberal democracy, increased ontological security concerns, increased opportunities for regional and international domination or influence. The threat of popular uprisings pretty much happened at the same year with Turkey, the popular uprisings in Russia. And an executive power supported by war-making, as you see in Ukraine and also in Russia's involvement in Syria. The tools of competitive authoritarianism in both countries is also very much in place. In both Russia and Turkey, I mean. Large-scale abuses of power into elections, lack of judicial independence, weak legislative institutions, weak presence of independent media outlets, and I can again go on in the code book of authoritarianism. However, there are also major differences. Turkey has followed the populist path to authoritarianism. Russia, however, a nationalist path to authoritarianism. As political scientists, when it comes to democracy, we tend to classify democracies on the basis of how they rule, right? We focus on procedures when we talk about democracies. But when we talk about authoritarian systems, we tend to emphasize who rules. Either this person or the military. We all know the Barbara Geddes classification, so we focus on that. Who rules, not how they rule. In both Russia and Turkey, we see that an all-powerful leader rules with no minimum checks and balances. That's why my title is the personalizer, right? But Turkey's populist path to authoritarianism is different than Turkey's nationalist path to authoritarianism. With the Turkey's populist path, in Turkey, with this populist path, Turkey singled out a significant portion of the country, in that almost 50% of it, most of them are Alevis, seculars, and Kurds, and this and that, as the enemy of the people, the populist people, right? Creating an intensely polarized and inherently unstable and unpredictable political climate. So this is an unpredictable, unstable authoritarianism because it followed the populist path and created this very polarized climate. Russia, however, did not follow such an anti-establishment, anti-elitist, populist path, but a more inclusive nationalist path, right? Not singling out a period in the history or people as the enemies of the state. Again, the Putin's discourse really focuses on the people, but that people is not polarizing the people of the populism. So you have a nationalist path to authoritarianism in Russia. For this reason, by comparing these two cases that I know, I favor the use of the term personalized rule as an umbrella concept to explain the democratic backlash of our age rather than the populism that many of us favors, because it really is how they rule, but not the whole story as in the case of Russia. Indeed, I clearly believe that what we are currently experiencing is the global rise of personalized politics, but with diverging consequences depending on how these regimes rule. And the future of these regimes is really about how they rule, not who rules. So I want to wrap up by going back to my personal story. Growing up in an intensely unstable and repressive country,